It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Conversations with Joan. Conversations with Joan will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life's Conversations with Joan. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Conversations with Joan focuses on topics that are important to your life, from health and wellness to professional development to personal well-being. Changemakers join me to share their insights, tips, and strategies so you can thrive and live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. Now, let's start talking. The subconscious brain is like a huge memory bank whose function is to store and retrieve data. Its job is to ensure that you respond exactly the way you were programmed. Today's guest, Dr. Mike Dow, says that the subconscious brain has the power to make you healthier, wealthier, and happier, and that tapping into your subconscious brain is easy and effective. He's here today to talk about his technique that he says can change your life. Dr. Dow is a New York Times bestselling author who is a brain health, mental illness, relationship, addiction, and nutrition expert. He has hosted shows on TLC, VH1, and E, and he's part of Dr. Oz's core team of experts. Dr. Dow is a recurring guest co-host on The Doctors, and you've also seen him as LaToya Jackson's therapist on Owns My Life with LaToya, and as the Bachelor's therapist on Freeform's Ben and Laura. He is the author of Your Subconscious Brain Can Change Your Life. Welcome, Dr. Dow. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So before we get into your work, I want to start off talking about you. What happened in your life that gave you the mission to help people heal their brain?
Well, what was so interesting about my journey of brain health and really believing in the brain itself. My brother had a massive stroke when he was just 10 years old. He has a rare brain disease called Moya disease. And I was 15 at the time, and my father, who was a physician, had my brother take massive doses of omega-3s and all of these things that people at the time said were snake oil. We really believed in my brother, and one doctor told my family that, the stroke was so massive that we should just put my brother in a nursing home. Well, I can tell you that today, even though my brother's stroke was massive, my brother's independent, he walks, he drives, things that just shouldn't have been possible given the size of his stroke. So, I really started to believe in the power of hope, the power of neuroplasticity, and I was really more interested in the way that food, nutrition, hope, psychology rewired the brain. So I started to go down this path of psychology and helping people, and I became a cognitive behavioral therapist. So that was sort of my first love in looking at the way foods and omega-3s and amino acids change and rewire the brain. I have a book. I wrote a book with my brother about stroke recovery. I wrote the book, The Brain Fog Fix, but then I discovered hypnosis. And I have to tell you, the first time I experienced clinical hypnosis, I was just blown away. And I knew that this was a whole nother layer of tools that could take everything that I was doing in my private practice with people and patients, and it could help people to go to the next level, especially people who had problems or goals that were elusive, anything from physical problems, fibromyalgia, migraines, irritable bowel syndrome, or, things in their lives like building a business or psych-oriented ones like phobias. So, I really was so excited to write this book, Your Subconscious Brain Can Change Your Life, because I believe that hypnosis and the power of our subconscious is truly potent.
So, Doctor, I remember when I was growing up and we studied the brain and science, we had this belief that as you aged or if there was an injury, that was pretty much it. It was degenerative and the brain would lose its function. But now, through the science, as you said, neuroplasticity and neuroscience, we're learning that we can heal the brain, create new pathways. So what does the science tell us about the ability to heal our brain?
That's absolutely right. So decades ago, we really thought that, after young adulthood, the brain stopped formulating and creating new brain cells. We now know that that's not true, that even middle age and late adulthood, that we have the power to create new brain cells through neuroplasticity, through a novel environment. So challenging experiences, exercise, great foods, and even the power of hypnosis and the subconscious. One of the founders of modern hypnosis was a psychiatrist who had polio, and he dealt with paralysis, and he taught himself how to walk again by putting himself in trance via hypnosis, and he would visualize himself walking again, and that's how he taught himself how to walk again. And what's so interesting, especially because a lot of stroke survivors have neurofatigue, when you can see yourself doing something and then you can do it, you can create these new neural pathways, especially when you, as a stroke survivor, have some brain cells that are dead. Or, by the way, we're all losing brain cells. If you're an adult, our brains are all shrinking as adults a little bit, and we are losing brain cells. But guess what? We can grow brain cells by stimulating our brains, by challenging our brains, by learning new things, by playing memory games, right? So isn't it so exciting that we can take all of these tools from exercise, hypnosis, foods, challenging experiences, even visiting, I just visited Tokyo for the first time, creating a mental map of a new city in our brain. That actually creates these new brain cells. And these new, challenging, novel experiences can really help to keep our brains healthy, happy, and actually look younger.
And I think it's so important that we keep teaching this message. Recently, I made a presentation to a local university to STEM students, to students that were involved in the science, technology, engineering, and math program. And I talked to them about the power of their thoughts. And when the presentation was over, this young woman came up to me and told me that she's been battling leukemia and that it has come back, and now she has to have a bone marrow transplant. And she said that I gave her another tool because she had no idea that her thoughts had anything to do with her healing. So I think getting this message out there is so important. And what I'd like to just back up for a moment and give our listeners a real 101 on the brain, the different parts, the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. Can you describe those to us?
Yeah, so the conscious is that part of you that is basically on the front burner during the day. So what's really interesting about my book, if you turn into the front cover, you're going to see brain scans of mine. You're going to see a SPECT scan, which shows blood flow and activity, and you're also going to see an EEG, which uses electricity to show brain waves. And so you're actually going to see my own brain at rest. So you're going to see what my brain looks when it's using a conscious state. And then you're going to see my brain when it's using a subconscious brainwave or in a subconscious activated trance via hypnosis. So that conscious part of you, I'm going to give you an example that can help a lot of people who've never experienced hypnosis understand what it feels like. So have you ever had that experience where you're driving home and you start thinking about something or worrying about something or planning something, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in your driveway and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I don't even remember driving home, right?
Yeah, all the time.
So in that instance, a lot of things that you learn consciously at first, if you know it really well, your subconscious can take it over. That's not true at first, but eventually that can be true. So if you play the piano or if you type or if you drive, eventually your subconscious can take that over. So driving is something that your subconscious actually took over and your conscious was on the front burner, so you were aware of what you were thinking of or worrying about or planning, and your subconscious was actually taking care of you, and your subconscious was taking care of the task of driving. So sometimes we have that split brain where we have these two tracks going on. Now, we always actually during the day have some sort of it, but we are usually aware of the conscious track because the conscious is on the front burner, the subconscious tends to be on the back burner. And those two flip only usually for most people at night because we tend to have theta brain waves as measured on an EEG at night when we dream. So when you use hypnosis, an EEG will show deep slow theta brain waves, which are the same brain waves an EEG would show in a sleep study, for example, when you are dreaming in rapid eye movement periods of sleep. So that is usually the only time, unless you use hypnosis to create that same state, and then the subconscious can then pop onto the front burner. So looking at the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious, well, I actually use the term subconscious and unconscious interchangeably. People in the field of hypnosis, half of the hypnosis people use unconscious, half of them use subconscious. I prefer subconscious because I like it better. And then in terms of brain structures, what you'll see in my brain, the subconscious tends to light up a couple different places. So you're going to see the prefrontal cortex lit up, so there's more blood flow and activity when you light up the prefrontal cortex. Also, you're going to see lots of activity and blood flow in my basal ganglia, which is where a lot of dopamine is produced, a lot of that feel-good, upping neurotransmitter. And then this is a really interesting part. My eyes were closed during this, so you would think back in the back of my brain, in the occipital lobe, that part of my brain should go, dark. Right. Well, that part of my brain was lit up because I was visualizing something. So that part of my brain was very, very active. Now, that's really, really handy because what you can visualize, you are actually tricking the brain into thinking it is creating an experience. And let me tell you how that could be handy for people. If you have a phobia, I just filmed an episode of the Dr. Oz show, and there was a woman who had a traumatic experience where she was attacked by a bird, and she has a bird phobia. So, of course, now she avoids birds. So I helped her to conquer her phobia by visualizing this first step in conquering her fear of birds. Now, if she can do that with hypnosis, brain scans have shown that if you just, quote, imagine it in a conscious brain state, your brain doesn't think that you're actually doing it. But if you use hypnosis, your brain is actually tricked into thinking that it's conquering that fear, that you're actually encountering that bird or that plane or whatever it is that you fear, or public speaking, whatever it is. So it's really interesting that you can use this skill and looking at these different parts of the brain, the subconscious versus the conscious.
How long does it take to make a lasting change utilizing that technique?
If somebody is a high hypnotizable, we can create change in about 10 minutes. Other people who aren't as hypnotizable are going to need about 4 to 8 sessions. The good news about my book is it comes with audio hypnosis tracks with my voice, so you just listen to the track over and over again. And after like the 6th, 7th, 8th time, everyone will start to feel the benefits. Some people say that after the first time, oh my gosh, what was that? That was really intense. And I my thoughts just started to change because, the other thing, our subconscious tends to be very suggestible, like a child, before we develop that adolescent that talks back. The dominant brainwave of children that believe in fairy tales and have imaginary friends, that very suggestible, idealistic, optimistic part of ourselves, we know that the brainwave of children is theta, which is the same brainwave that we can generate by using trance and hypnosis. So we know that we can use that brainwave to do all sorts of magical things, like plant positive suggestions for people struggling. You're talking about thoughts, those negative thoughts with somebody, let's say, dealing with cancer or, let's say, depression. There's a really fascinating study from the psychiatry department at Ohio State University where they measured the immune system via white blood cell count, and they taught medical students hypnosis, well, half of them, and the other half they did not, while they were going through their exams. And they found that the white blood cells in the hypnosis group improved. So it actually improves your immune system. So that's really potent for cancer survivors. And in fact, hypnosis is now being used at prestigious cancer centers like MD Anderson. They're using this procedure called hypnosedation. So a procedure like a cyst on a breast, a cancerous cyst, a mass, that would have required general anesthesia, they are now using hypnosis with light sedation. And they're finding that people are recovering better with less inflammation. So there's really a really useful tool in terms of immune system, thoughts, even physical recovery using the power of our subconscious brains.
I had a conversation once with Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he shared with me the results of a study that, to this day, they still amaze me. He had said that there were two groups of cancer patients, and one group was given chemotherapy, the actual drug, and the other group was given a placebo but told that they were receiving chemotherapy. The group that never received anything more than saline solution exhibited the side effects of someone undergoing chemotherapy. And I always thought that that just really illustrated how powerful our thoughts and our beliefs and our mind is. And if we could learn how to harness that for good, how it can really change our life.
Absolutely. I mean, the power of our beliefs are truly potent. And, what's really interesting about all of the studies, the research of people who have gone into spontaneous remission, these really miraculous cases of people with stage 3 and 4 cancer who shouldn't have went into remission. They have a lot of things in common, but one of them is this really optimistic state of mind. So isn't it really also so interesting that they believed that they would get better? Mm-hmm. So, having that negative state of mind, we know what that does to the immune system. So isn't it so interesting that having a positive belief, we know that the placebo effect is a belief that if you take saline solution, you're going to have some symptoms. But on the other hand, if you have a belief that you are going to get better, you can actually supercharge your immune system. And yes, you will actually tend to get better.
Earlier, you mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy. For listeners who may not know what this is, what is the basic premise of this treatment, and how does it approach what someone's going through?
The first step of my protocol in the book starts with cognitive behavioral therapy. So I have people identify these 7 pitfall thought patterns. So things like polarized thinking, that's black or white thinking, pessimistic thinking, so that's that catastrophic worst case scenario thinking, personalization, where you always are blaming yourself for things going wrong, paralysis analysis, which is that kind of ruminative stewing, I can't stop thinking about it. So there are 7 of those thought patterns. So once you identify the thought patterns in your head, and these are the thought patterns that scientists, doctors have identified that people with anxiety and depression tend to struggle with, you can, first of all, know that is, excuse me, that is contributing to your negative state of mind. And once you know that, then we can target that via hypnosis. So traditional cognitive behavioral therapy would have you elicit contrary evidence, looking at all of the times in your life that prove that negative thought wrong. I take it to the next level because I help you to use hypnosis to help you to see the event. So let's say you're having a pessimistic thought, a catastrophic thought of, oh my gosh, I'm going to do so poorly on tomorrow's presentation at work. I'm probably going to get fired and lose my job. So, I'm going to help you see all of the times that you just did fantastically at work as the contrary evidence that will prove that thought wrong so that you can stay in that positive state of mind, really filling yourself with that sense of confidence and joy and purpose in what you do. So it's really important to put these tools together because we also know that when you combine cognitive behavioral therapy with hypnosis, the effects are magnified.
With the understanding that there's always a place for medication and it does have an important role, do you think people end up being medicated for anxiety or depression, or even using the wrong type of therapy when they really need cognitive behavioral therapy?
I think in America there is a tendency towards over-medication. So, when we really comb through the data, medication, especially the antidepressant class and, of course, the benzodiazepines, are not as effective as people think. They certainly are effective for some people. But when we look at just the modality of the treatment and how it's administered, cognitive behavioral therapy obviously requires you to attend weekly hour-long sessions, and that, for some people is either inconvenient or time-consuming, or, there are some people who just therapy is just not in their comfort zone. And, of course, popping a pill can be more inexpensive both for them and their insurance company. So I think a lot of people just say, I'll just take this pill. But when we look at it, in terms of the benzodiazepines, that tends to make anxiety worse in the long term. The antidepressants, they're really not that effective for a really large percentage of people who do take them, but they are effective for some. And I really believe that, they should be reserved for the people who have tried other things first, because they are not a magic bullet. When we look across different areas of medicine, they are notoriously low. The efficacy is really low. When we look at something like, here's a bacterial infection, we know that there's a 99% chance that this drug is going to cure that bacteria. And, those rates are not the same when it comes to depression and anxiety. And I think we have this idea that, there's probably a 99% chance that it will, and that's just not true. So I think that we really should be looking at food. We now know that the Mediterranean diet, the first human study was published, showed that the Mediterranean diet can treat people with moderate to even major depression. So we know that diet plays a role. We know that your thoughts play a role because cognitive behavioral therapy can also treat moderate depression. So I think we're looking at lifestyle, exercise, and study after study outperforms prescription antidepressants. So I think we have to look at all of these things as a whole and really look at what are the things. And of course, mental health is also so complex. Is it your relationship? Is it your lack of exercise? Is it the way you talk to yourself? Is it that voice? Your father's voice, who is very negative and hard on you, and how do we really tell the difference? It's sometimes a lot more complex than a bacterial infection, where it's a very cause and effect, linear effect.
The book is Your Subconscious Brain Can Change Your Life, Overcome Obstacles, Heal Your Body, and Reach Any Goal with a Revolutionary Technique. If you'd like to get more information about Dr. Dow and his work, you can visit drmikedow.com. That's drmikedow.com. Doctor, in about 30 seconds or less, what's the takeaway? What would you like to leave our listeners with?
I hope that people understand that their subconscious brains are truly potent, and if you can learn how to harness it, you can really do some incredible, magical things. And what your subconscious brain can see, your conscious can help you to manifest and create.
Dr. Dow, thank you so much for joining us and for educating us on the power of the brain and how we can use the brain instead of letting it use us. This is life-changing information, and I'm so glad that you were here to share it with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This is Conversations with Joan. Stay with us. We'll be right back.